Imagine waking up, right? Not to the usual city sounds, the traffic, the sirens, but to something, well, wild. Like maybe the chatter of monkeys swinging across telephone wires right outside your window. Or seeing a herd of deer just, calmly grazing in your local park. Sounds pretty far-fetched for most of us, maybe like something out of a movie. But here's the thing. What if I told you it's actually not that far-fetched anymore? It's becoming, well, surprisingly real in places. You've got wild boars basically making themselves at home in Barcelona streets, leopards showing up in Mumbai. Nature is kind of pushing at the door, and these aren't just like one-off weird stories anymore. They seem to hint at something bigger changing. So for our deep dive today, the real question isn't if this is happening. It clearly is. It's more like, what if this wasn't just the occasional sighting that goes viral? What if this became the new normal? What if we, humans and wild animals, really started properly coexisting in our cities, not just on the edges, but like right there with us? What would that actually look like? How would that even feel?
And that's exactly what we want to dig into today. It's this really fascinating idea. Maybe it seems a bit radical at first glance, but it's getting more and more attention. Urban rewilding. We're not just talking about, planting a few more trees or creating little nature reserves. It's much bigger than that. It's about rethinking our cities from the ground up, how we interact with nature, and maybe most importantly, how we see ourselves within that natural world. So we'll trace how we got so separated from nature in the first place, look at the surprising ways animals are already coming back, and then really weigh up the benefits and, let's be honest, the real risks of sharing our space like that. But fundamentally, it's not just about policies or new bridges, though those are important. It really drills down to a massive shift in how we think, a choice, really, that we might be facing sooner rather than later.
That idea of a choice really hits home, doesn't it? Because our separation feels so normal now, so baked in. But it wasn't always like this, right? Let's maybe unpack that history first. Understanding how we got here feels pretty key to figuring out where we could go. For, like most of human history, people and animals lived really close together, shared the same spaces. Think about ancient communities living alongside wolves, bears, you name it. It was dangerous, no doubt. Life was tough. Encounters could be deadly, but it was also deeply significant, culturally and spiritually. Our ancestors kind of knew they were part of something bigger, this web of life. Their stories, their art, their survival was all tangled up with wild creatures. But then things started to change. Slowly at first, then faster. Agriculture was a big one. When we started farming, settling down, clearing land, that was the first big step. We started changing the land to suit us instead of just fitting in. We began modifying landscapes on a huge scale. Forests came down, plains got plowed. Then came cities, not just villages, but dense, organized places designed primarily for human safety and human needs. We built walls, literally and figuratively, created this clear line, civilized inside, wild outside. And then, boom, the Industrial Revolution just put that whole process on steroids. Factories, massive cities, railways, roads, consuming land like never before, pushing nature further and further away, physically and, mentally too. The wild became this inconvenience or a resource, or just something to fence off. And the result, pretty obvious, really. Animal habitats just shrank massively. As our footprint grew, theirs got smaller, broken up. Biodiversity loss started accelerating. And that's kind of the context for national parks, reserves, zoos. And yes, like stated goal and a real goal was protecting wildlife, absolutely. But they also served this other purpose, maybe less talked about, keeping wildlife separate from our daily lives. Animals became something you go to see. Behind glass, on TV, maybe on a special trip, not something you just live alongside. And that shaped our expectation, didn't it? Animals belong out there, we belong in here. That felt like the rule.
Yeah, exactly. And what's so striking now, and what really messes with that rule, is how reality is just ignoring it. This idea that animals stay neatly in the wild is proving, pretty flimsy. We saw that huge, almost bizarre global experiment during the 2020 lockdowns, didn't we? Human activity just plummeted, traffic, noise, everything, and suddenly nature seemed to just walk back in. It was amazing. And those images went everywhere. Mountain lions, pumas strolling through downtown Santiago, Chile. That was wild. Peacocks just strutting around residential areas in India, looking completely unfazed. I remember those dolphins in the Venice canals. Okay, so apparently that specific story got a bit muddled, maybe debunked later. But the idea went viral instantly. People wanted to believe it, Which tells you something, I think. There's this real hunger for reconnection, this desire to see nature bounce back. But here's the really critical point, and our sources are clear on this.
This wasn't just a weird lockdown blip. It wasn't temporary. Long before 2020, this was already happening. Nature was already finding ways back in. Steadily. Think about leopards in Mumbai.
They frequently come into the city from that big national park right next door.
Yeah.
They navigate neighborhoods. It's
Yeah.
intense. Or coyotes in Chicago.
Yeah.
They become masters of the urban night. These streets, underpasses, green patches, they've adapted. And in some India, you've got elephants marching through tea estates, crossing roads, following these ancient routes that just happen to cut through human areas now. They have incredible memory, like internal GPS. So these aren't just cute anecdotes for social media. There's actually a scientific term for this, trophic rewilding. It specifically means the return of large animals, megafauna, to ecosystems they were pushed out of. And it's not just about them being there. It's about the roles they play. They start restoring ecological processes, like herbivores manage plants, predators control smaller animal populations. They kickstart the system again. So what we're seeing, these incidents all over the world, they aren't outliers. They're probably early signs of a much bigger trend, a challenge to how we've organized things.
Right. So if we put that all together, the argument isn't really if they're coming back, or even if they can. The evidence points pretty strongly towards yes, they are, and yes, they can. So that totally shifts the focus, doesn't it? It's not if anymore, it's how. How do we respond? The question becomes, what if we didn't just, tolerate it, put up with the odd deer eating the roses or the occasional scary headline? What if we actually actively welcomed them, made real intentional space, and tried to make it work for everyone? And that right there, that leads us straight into this whole idea of urban rewilding. And when we say urban rewilding, it's really crucial to get one thing straight from the start. We're not talking about just letting cities crumble and letting nature run riot, like some post-apocalyptic movie scene. That's not it at all. The core idea is actually quite sophisticated. It's a growing movement focused on deliberately designing cities so that wild species can genuinely thrive right alongside humans. It's about aiming for a kind of symbiosis where nature isn't an invader, but an integrated, beneficial part of city life. And this is where it gets super interesting, I think. It's not about giving up on cities. It's about smart, intentional, integrated design. A real shift from just protecting nature over there in reserves to weaving it right into the fabric of where we live. And there's growing evidence that this is good for us too, right? Better air, better water, even better mental health. It's not just about the animals, it's smart city planning.
Exactly. And this design thinking shows up in some really concrete ways. Key features, you could say. One of the big ones is wildlife corridors. Now, don't just picture a strip of grass. Think more like carrion. Green bridges or underpasses designed specifically for animals. They go over or under highways, railways, things that usually block animal movement. The Netherlands is actually amazing at this. They call them ecoducts. Some are huge, like hundreds of meters wide, covered in soil, trees, shrubs, mimicking the habitat. So deer, badgers, wild boar, they actually use them instead of trying to dash across the motorway. It's vital for connecting populations, letting animals move around. Then you've got coexistence zones. These are basically dedicated habitats built right into the urban landscape. It could be parks designed with specific species in mind, or even green rooftops, green walls on buildings. Singapore is a great example here. They integrate green walls and sky gardens everywhere. And these aren't just for show. They're designed as habitats. They attract butterflies, birds, insects right in the middle of the high-rises. It shows this real commitment to tucking nature into every possible gap. Another thing often overlooked is reducing night lighting. Seems small, maybe. But light pollution is a massive problem for nocturnal animals. So many creatures rely on natural darkness for finding their way, hunting, mating. Bright city lights just mess everything up. Think about migratory birds getting disoriented, or owls struggling to hunt. Simply using smarter lighting, less bright, pointing downwards, maybe turning off unnecessary lights, can make a huge difference for wildlife trying to navigate the urban night. And of course, something very practical, smart waste management. This is key for preventing conflict. If animals like raccoons, foxes, maybe even bears get drawn into neighborhoods because our bins are overflowing or waste is just left out, well, that usually ends badly for someone. So, using secure, animal-proof bins, maybe smarter collection schedules, it reduces the temptation. It keeps animals from getting lured into risky situations, which is safer for everyone. And some places are thinking really big. London, for example. Their rewilding plans talk about possibly bringing back beavers, even bison, in some outer areas. Beavers are amazing ecosystem engineers, right? Their dams create wetlands, which are great for other species, help manage water. It just shows the ambition isn't just about small critters. It's potentially about restoring bigger ecological functions right here in the city. And this comes up again and again in the research, these physical changes, the corridors, the green roofs, the smart bins, they're essential, they're innovative, but they're only half the battle. To really make this work, to get true urban rewilding, you have to go beyond just the infrastructure. It needs something deeper.
Right. And that brings us smack bang into the really big question, doesn't it? Is this whole idea of true coexistence, especially with larger animals, maybe potentially dangerous ones, is it just a nice fantasy, a green dream? Or could it actually be a real practical future? And let's be totally honest here, living closely with wild animals definitely comes with risks, real ones, complex ones. We have to look at those downsides clear-eyed, not just get swept up in the vision, because these shifts would have consequences we need to be ready for.
Yeah, the sources we looked at are pretty clear about the dangers. First off, the big one, human-wildlife conflict. When people and wild animals share space, especially predators or just large animals, there's always a potential for things to go wrong. We see terrible incidents sometimes, right? Leopards near Mumbai, coyotes in North American suburbs. Sadly, it can lead to deaths, both animal and human. Just being close to powerful wild creatures carries inherent risk. You need serious management, constant awareness. Then there's the whole issue of zoonotic diseases. Diseases jumping from animals to humans, or maybe the other way around.
The closer we live, the more we interact, especially in new ways in cities, the higher the chance of diseases spreading between species. Think about things like Lyme disease from ticks on deer, or maybe rabies in foxes. It's a major public health consideration. You'd need really strong monitoring, health education, quick responses. It's complex. And finally, you absolutely have to think about the impact on livelihoods, especially for people working the land right at the edge of cities. Farmers, for instance. Having deer or boar or even elephants raiding your crops, that could wipe out your whole income for the year. It's devastating. Or ranchers losing livestock to predators. These aren't just small annoyances. They threaten people's survival, their way of life, even local food supply. So yeah, the vision is appealing, but these are heavy, real-world problems. The sources do suggest we can manage these risks, but it takes serious planning, real money for mitigation, and crucially, getting the community involved and educated continuously.
You're absolutely right to hammer those points home. Because ignoring those challenges, or downplaying them, that's a recipe for failure. But if we do tackle them head on, with that careful planning and really deep community buy-in, like you said, then coexistence stops being just possible and starts looking genuinely beneficial, even essential. When you look past the immediate hurdles, the upsides are huge. They touch everything from the environment to our own health. Okay, so first, ecosystem restoration. This is massive. When wild animals come back, they aren't just there, they get to work. They help fix things we've broken, ecologically speaking. Birds and insects pollinate plants vital for city parks, gardens, trees. Bigger animals spread seeds, helping plants diversify. Predators like foxes or birds of prey, they help control rodent populations naturally, maybe reducing the need for poisons. Just having more species around makes the whole urban ecosystem healthier, more resilient. It gets those natural processes working again, which is good for the city's long-term health. It's like a positive feedback loop. And then there's the impact on our mental health. And this isn't just a fuzzy feeling. There's real science here. Study after study shows that being around nature, seeing wildlife, it reduces stress, cuts anxiety, makes people report feeling more satisfied with life. I read about one study, I think, where just 15 minutes in a park with visible wildlife lowered stress hormones, like cortisol, significantly compared to being in a purely built-up area. Imagine having that kind of access regularly. Hearing birds, seeing a fox trot by. It's not just nice, it's demonstrably good for our well-being. It connects us to something bigger. So, for you listening, this could mean a genuinely healthier, less stressful city life. Rewilding also offers this chance for cultural renewal, which I find really interesting. Many indigenous cultures, ancestral traditions, they had this deep understanding of living with nature, not dominating it. Animals were seen as kin, part of the same world, spiritually important. Our modern separation has often meant losing that connection, that wisdom. Bringing wildlife back could help us rediscover some of that respect, that sense of interdependence. It connects back to that history we talked about, maybe helps us find a more mindful way of living, and this is critical right now. Climate resilience. Biodiverse cities are simply stronger cities in the face of climate change. Healthy urban ecosystems with lots of plants and animals, they cope better with extremes. Think about heavy rain. Healthy soil and plants absorb more water, reducing floods. Or heat waves, trees and green spaces provide shade, cooling things down through evaporation. This makes cities more livable, more robust as the climate gets more unpredictable. It directly impacts everyone's quality of life, now and in the future. So what does it all mean for you, for your community? Well, it could mean moving from these often gray, kind of sterile cityscapes towards something more vibrant, more alive. Ecosystems that don't just look nice, but actually support us: cleaner air, cleaner water and enrich us mentally and culturally. It's about building communities that are healthier, maybe happier, definitely more connected, and yeah, better prepared for the environmental challenges ahead.
That really does paint a compelling picture, doesn't it? It feels much less abstract, more about genuinely improving human lives right where we live. But, like the research keeps saying, the biggest hurdle, the steepest climb, it isn't necessarily the policy changes or the infrastructure projects, important as they are. It's something deeper, more internal. It's about how we see things. It's that shift in mindset.
It really forces us to ask a huge question, doesn't it? One that kind of shakes the foundations of how we've run things for centuries. We've mostly operated as if we're the masters of the planet, right?
Yeah.
The ones in charge. We build, we control, we manage nature, assuming it should fit around us, or stay out of the way in its designated wild boxes. But wild animals, they just don't play by those rules. They completely challenge that view. They don't fill out permits to cross a road. They don't ask permission to look for food in a park, a deer stepping into traffic, a leopard in a neighborhood, an elephant on its ancient path. They're following instinct, ecology, not human zoning laws. Their sheer independence, their wildness, it forces us to confront how much we rely on being in total control. So if we're serious about welcoming them back, making real space, it means we have to consciously, actively give up total control of our environment. We have to accept a certain amount of unpredictability, accept that maybe some areas aren't just for us 24/7, that our routines might need to flex around to other living beings. It's not just about physical space, it's philosophical. Are we willing to share authority, essentially, share governance of our cities? And that would ripple outwards. It would mean fundamentally redesigning safety systems, education, transport. How does the school handle recess if coyotes are known to be nearby? How do roads or trains adapt to migrating animals? Maybe smart sensors, dynamic speed limits? These aren't small adjustments. It's rethinking how our cities function, building in consideration for non-human life right from the start, challenging our human-centered designs. And maybe the deepest part, it demands we actively cultivate empathy for non-human life, really shifting how we see animals, not just as resources or pests or cute things, but as fellow inhabitants with their own needs, their own right to be here in this shared space. That takes a big cultural and ethical leap, moving from just managing nature to genuinely respecting it, feeling a responsibility towards it. Stewardship, not just control.
Wow, that is a huge ask, isn't it? To consciously let go of that control, to rethink systems we've relied on for ages, and to really develop that empathy for creatures so different from us. Can we actually do that as a society? Are we willing to reimagine civilization itself, not as something we own, but something we share with the wild? It really cuts to the core of our values, our vision for what kind of world we want.
It absolutely does. And while that cultural shift is, probably the hardest part, technology can help make this dance of coexistence a bit more manageable. New tools in AI, monitoring, smart city tech. They can give us ways to share space more safely, more predictably, maybe bridging that gap between our need for order and nature's unpredictability. Like geofencing and AI alerts, they're getting really good. Imagine sensors and cameras tracking animal movements discreetly. If a large animal enters a certain zone, maybe near a school or a busy road, the system could automatically ping residents' phones or change digital road signs. It gives people a heads up, lets them take precautions, avoid surprise encounters. That helps manage risk proactively. Bioacoustic sensors are another cool area. Basically, sensitive microphones listening for specific animal sounds, distress calls, territorial markers, just the sounds of certain species being present. Analyzing these sounds gives managers clues about animal activity, well-being, population numbers, all without disturbing them directly. It helps us understand their world better so we can manage ours more intelligently. And then you have things like wildlife cameras and public reporting apps. Not just for cool videos. Good cameras in key spots track animal movements, identify potential conflict areas, show behavior patterns, and apps where people can report sightings responsibly. That crowdsourced data, when verified, is gold for managers. It builds this real-time picture, helps manage encounters ethically, makes the whole system more adaptive. But, and this is so important, it comes up constantly. The tech is only a tool. It helps, it informs, it predicts, but it can't replace the human side. The local knowledge, people getting involved, that attitude shift, that's crucial. The most successful projects seem to be really community-based, training locals about animal behavior, getting them involved in decisions, educating kids. When the community feels ownership, understands the why and the how, it works so much better than rules imposed from above. It becomes shared stewardship, shared responsibility.
And that really brings it right back to you listening to this, doesn't it? Because this isn't just theory. It's not just about what governments or scientists do. It's deeply personal. It makes us look at ourselves and ask, am I ready for this? for my own life to potentially change. So seriously, ask yourself, would I really be okay with, say, a family of foxes living nearby, even if it meant being more careful with trash or keeping my cat indoors at night? Could I adapt my habits to their needs, understand why they behave the way they do, not just expect them to fit into my world? And what does being a good neighbor even mean? Does it extend beyond humans? Could we be good neighbors to species that don't follow our rules, but whose presence might actually make our lives richer? It just underlines that point, doesn't it? This isn't just policy, it's personal willingness, it's empathy, it's about our own individual relationship with nature. It really does start with us. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? It's been quite a journey. We started by looking back at how we became so separated from nature, building cities that kept the wild out, only to find wildlife pushing back in, surprisingly, persistently. Then we dove into the how of urban rewilding, the cool designs like wildlife corridors, green roofs, the practical stuff that's starting to change our cities. We weighed up those amazing potential benefits: ecological health, our own well-being, cultural connections, climate resilience against the very real risks and challenges, the conflicts that need careful thought. And finally, we landed on maybe the biggest piece, that profound shift needed in how we think, moving from seeing ourselves as masters of nature to maybe participants, partners.
Which leads to this really powerful final thought, kind of a vision drawn from everything we've discussed. It asks us to stretch our imagination. Imagine a future where kids grow up seeing elephants, maybe not literally next door everywhere, but as part of the wider landscape, not just sad figures in a circus or behind bars. Imagine cities filled not just with traffic noise, but with birdsong, the buzz of insects, a richer, more vibrant soundscape where nature isn't drowned out. Imagine animals not crammed into ever smaller wild spaces, but moving more freely, finding space within and around our human world because we consciously, deliberately made that room for them.
With empathy.
And this isn't just some fuzzy feel-good dream. The science, the pilot projects, the growing conversation around urban rewilding, it shows this is becoming a real possibility, a tangible choice we can make. So the question isn't really whether wild animals can live among us again. They're kind of proving they can, adapting in ways we didn't expect. The real question, the one that sticks with you, the one that really matters for the future we build, is simple but huge. Will we let them?